On the Banks of Plum Creek is book number 4 in the Little House series by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And this was an okay book. I thought it was good. This is the first book in the series to get like a major award. It won the Newbery Honor Award, and apparently like every other book in the series after this one also got a Newbery Honor Award. So this must be the point where people thought the series got better, and I think there are like two possible explanations for that. I thought the first 3 books are all fine. There's a lot of pioneer chores, and I think a lot of the stories are interchangeable. Like if I picked up a chapter from book number 1, swapped it with a chapter from book number 2, it would be hard to notice because they're mostly about, just our characters are by themselves. This one, our characters move to Plum Creek. And there's a lot more characters around, and that's why I think the series gets better. I think it gets better because there's more people. They're close to town. They go to school. The girls go to school for the first time. They have to deal with other children their own age. And one of them really mean. It's like, oh, the storekeeper's kid is such a jerk. And there's just a lot of drama with that. And that's interesting. I think the other major reason maybe that the series picks up at this point is because Laura, the series is semi-autobiographical. It is fiction. It is fiction. In real life, her family went back to the house in the big woods and stayed there for a year or two before going to Plum Creek in Minnesota. But that's like completely not in the story at all. In the story, they go directly from Indian Territory to this place in Minnesota. So that gives you a good example of what I mean when I say, the story it's kind of real, but fictionalized. Yeah. So, because like this takes place like 2 years after the next book, we're getting to the point where Laura can actually remember more of the stuff that happened. And I feel like that's probably also part of the reason why the story gets better is that, she can actually remember the stuff that happened. We're not talking about stuff that 4-year-old Laura had to deal with in the first book. This is more like stuff that like 9 to 10-year-olds. But like I said, there was that missing year or two in the house in Big Woods. I wonder why she didn't tell the story of her family going back to the Big Woods. I guess maybe because that was so similar to what happened in the first book, they decided not to go back to it. But still, so this book is definitely an increase in quality from the first 3, whether it's because there are more people for them to deal with, or it's because Laura just had a better time remembering. And it's not just generic chores that would have happened at any time during the year. It's like, no, this is a series of events that happened when they moved to Minnesota. So I'll try to quickly flip through the book. They've got this house that they're living in for the first part. It's a house that, they're on the side of a hill, and they live in that. Eventually, Pa manages to get money to build a real house because Pa manages to convert this big field into a wheat field. And this is a book where Pa really messes up. I think he made huge mistakes in the previous book, but he continues making huge mistakes here. And that's something that's just an interesting dynamic to go through because Laura, the character, really loves Pa and doesn't think he can do anything wrong. But adult Laura is portraying him as this flawed guy who makes terrible mistakes. And one of his big mistakes is not understanding his neighbors when his neighbors warn, this is grasshopper weather. It's grasshopper weather. Don't plant meat. No, don't plant wheat. Sorry. And Pa just completely ignores that and just, terrible mistake on his part. Like I would ask questions if my neighbors warned me. It's a terrible idea to plant wheat. But no, he goes all in on planting wheat and it's like, hey, we're gonna be so rich. And he uses the money from his wheat to build this fancy new house and buy a bunch of fancy stuff. Oh, and also when they go into town, there's like a new church. They help build the new church, and that's interesting. The Christmas was interesting because apparently the pastor goes back and forth. We have one Christmas at the church, and that was interesting because they have, I'm trying to find this picture. Well, going to Sunday school is interesting. It provides more opportunity for Laura to interact with the other girls in town. and seeing how that contrasts between the way her mom teaches Sunday school. But they sort of have a giving tree at Christmas where it's just like a bare tree, which is covered with presents. Instead of ornaments, they're presents like scarves and things. And he gives them out to all the people in town. And Laura is kind of a snot when she gets her fancy one, because it's like, oh, it looks way better than the shopkeeper's girl's. Her cape doesn't have a trim on it. So I feel much better now. Yeah. Gosh, yeah. And like there's dueling parties where the shopkeeper's daughter has this big party at the house, and then Laura's mom requires her to throw a party. And Laura purposely gets the shopkeeper's daughter in trouble, basically scares her into going into the creek where there's a crab and a bunch of leeches. And the shopkeeper's daughter it basically gets attacked by the leeches. Other things, Laura gets sucked in under the water. Laura keeps playing with the water, even though Pa tells her not to. Pa, like every single time, like he tries to dunk her under the water to teach her a lesson, and that doesn't work. And so there's also a scene where she almost drowns in the water because she just keeps messing with the water at the end of the creek. I'm sorry about the dog barking. I apologize for that. There is also, a similar scene with the hay where, they're told, girls, you can't use the hay stacks as a slide. That ruins the hay, and the hay is supposed to last all year. So she finds other ways of getting around that. She's like, okay, we won't use that as slide. We'll use the hay to roll down the hay. He didn't say we couldn't roll down the hay. He didn't say we couldn't climb up the hay. He didn't say we couldn't jump around on the hay, just that we can't slide down it. And when she tells her Pa, like we've seen in previous books, he's mad at first, but he's like, ha, that's so silly of you. I'll forgive you. You won't get punished. And I think she deserves some punishment, especially because we have this habitual bad behavior of her doing the exact same trick. That's like, Pa said I shouldn't go in the water, but he didn't say I can't put my feet in the water. Oh, he didn't say I couldn't put my legs in the water. It's like she keeps doing that trick. It's like, Pa, you need to enforce your own rules. And then the big scene that happens is when the grasshopper weather. So honestly, I feel like the first third of the book was probably pretty slow. It gets more I would have condensed the first third of the book to a single chapter and just gotten right to the stuff with them at school and interacting with the people in town. That's just me. I didn't really care that much about them settling into their little house under the hill, especially because they moved to the big house once Pa builds it. So, the big pivotal scene in the middle is when Pa grasshopper weather means locusts. So locusts show up and they just eat. It's just millions of these little grasshoppers, and they show up and they eat every single piece of wheat. They eat pretty much every single piece of hay, every single blade of grass, basically. And this is for like 100 miles, like 100-mile radius. There's nothing. All food is dead. There's just no food whatsoever. It all got eaten by the bugs. And that's why Pa should have listened when he was warned well in advance that the locusts were coming. Granted, his neighbors could have been a lot more specific in giving the warning, but they don't speak English that well. That's the explanation we get for that. So Pa he's already sold his wheat. He already sold half his wheat to build his house, and now there's no wheat. So that's a big problem. So Pa has to go out east and work for like 5 months there to do harvesting. And he has to do the same thing the next year because the locust isn't just a 1 year, like one time only problem. This is like a multi-year problem. What happens is like they lay eggs everywhere, and there's like, say, 100 eggs every square foot. So the entire property for miles and miles and miles is covered with grasshopper eggs. And the first thing to do is they wake up and then they start eating everything again. The family is forced to rely on underground foods like potatoes and radishes to make it through this time, but also Pa going back east to work off his debt as well. I feel like this really, I must have read this as a kid, either this or Land Before Time, number 5 really scared me about locusts, because that's also about locusts that just show up, they eat all the food in this particular area and then just leave. It's like, how do people survive? It's like, how did they not completely destroy all the Earth population is my question. We've got a giant squad of millions of these grasshopper locusts just eat everything. And what do they do after that? They'll just go and eat food on another place. Like, how do they not clean out all the food in existence? Especially when this book makes it clear that it's a 2-year thing, because the grasshoppers are going to immediately return the next year. So you can't like re-harvest your food either. That's just kind of freaked me out as a kid. That's all. And then Paw, like the ending is sort of the other big Paw mistake. You know, his neighbors warn him, by the way, blizzards in Minnesota are terrible, which they are. They are. And he's like, no, I can walk through a blizzard just fine. I gotta go to town for a bit. See you later. Also, I find it kind of weird that Paw's so happy about living near town. I understand, but like, that was the premise of book number 3, basically. It's like, he hates the fact that there are too many people in the big woods, too many people living close to him. And now he's like, hey, I'm living really close to other people. This is great. Like, what? Why did he completely change his opinion on that? Paw, like an idiot, decides he can just walk through the blizzard, and I love this explanation. It's like, well, you know, it's like when, you know, you've got a wind blowing to the south, so all you have to do is walk so the wind is hitting your left cheek, and make sure your cheek is always touching that wind, and that way you can go home to the west. I'm like, wind changes directions. Yeah. Gosh, Paw. But in a blizzard, wind is coming from all sorts of directions, and so that completely ruins his secret plan to get through the blizzard based on the direction where the wind is blowing against his left cheek. Which is a stupid plan. I'm sorry, Paw. How has he not died before? I shouldn't be so harsh on Paw. He is treated like a really good guy, and he does seem like a nice father. And, you know, he's the most popular character in the TV show. But I just find it interesting from an adult's perspective. The author does balance the adult perspective and the child perspective, both one. She does it well. The writing is very calm and relaxing as usual. She's a very wonderful author. I do think she overuses the phrase, there was never such a fill in the blank. Like, just reread the Christmas scene. She uses it like 5 times. There is never such a Christmas. There are never such happiness. Oh, the girls got candy sticks. There were never such delicious candy sticks for Christmas. But by golly, it's a cute scene. Still, like, quit reusing the same phrase all the time in your book. Gosh. Find a new way to describe it. So Paw, trapped in the blizzard, like, he eventually ends up in a dugout. You know, a place where he digs himself away out of the snow and has to save himself that way. And it turns out he was like 10 feet away from the front door of the house the whole time. He just didn't know it. And it was interesting, the scene of all Ma and the 3 children in the book. Also, like, the sisters play more of an important role in this book, probably because the little sister is big enough she can actually talk now. And yeah, so that was also a thing too. Like, you want to talk about characters, this book finally has like characters, named characters, whereas that was not really a thing in the other books in the series. And that's another reason why I think this book is sort of a step up from the previous ones. Like, not to say the previous ones were bad, but like, reading about old pioneer chores is kind of super boring sometimes. It depends on your mindset. Yeah, it's told in an interesting way, but I can totally sympathize with anybody who thinks it's boring. So I can understand why people think, hey, series is finally getting good. We're not talking about here's how we thresh hay and here's how we harvest hay. And it's not. We don't get a 3-chapter explanation of how Pa plants his wheat and harvests his wheat, because I think that was either book 1 or book 2. Like that's like a 3-chapter storyline, whereas this, it's like, no, we don't really get a heavy explanation, just that Paul rents a machine to harvest the wheat. That's it. I'm like, whoa, that was 1 page and not 3 chapters. Instant improvement. Instead, we got character development. So this is more my style. Clearly, it's more the Newbery award-winning style. A common complaint about the Newbery Award people is that they really love historical fiction. Books that take place a long time ago, like, they love books like that. And so this series is basically like award bait for them. Although really it does feel like it's just nostalgia for the author, that she just really loved this period of her life too. This is relatively happy, except for even though those monster locusts destroy almost everything, it's still a happy period in her lifetime that she remembers fondly. And yeah, the locusts eating everything, like, there's stakes, like there's conflict and drama. Conflict generally makes for really good writing, whether the conflict is man versus nature, which is the sort of like thematic conflict of the entire series, but now it's also man versus man, where the little girls are fighting with each other. I still think that's interesting, whether it's from this, whether it's from like the American Girl Felicity books. I am not going to say My Little Pony having the little ponies fight each other is always interesting, but that there's a lot of people who really love that drama too. So definitely I'd say this is an improvement over the previous books in the series. So I'm going to give this like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. I did say like the first third I think should be shrunk. And honestly, I do think this book is just huge, right? Isn't it like 300 something pages? Yeah. So I would probably try to cut out like 70 pages, or split it up into 2 different books. Maybe that might be what I would do if I was the editor in charge of the series. Although, that's probably what I would have done with the previous books as well, just condense them quite a bit. Okay, so thanks for watching my review. Bye.